So, dear Klaus, remember please that I am offering you the 18th century as an age of contradictions. I think every age is that. But in the 18th century, it's particularly glaring because the 18th century projects itself into our future, into their future, into our present, as a supremely controlled and conformist army of progress, and it's nothing of the kind, of course. So remember, nonetheless, that there is a great revolution going on from the vertical to the horizontal, so to speak. The Gothic tradition, which still endures, although it's called the Gothic Revival, it's nothing of the kind. The Gothic simply never went away. The Gothic inhabits verticality. It inhabits the spire of every Gothic and neo-Gothic, if we must call it that, church, which leads our eyes upwards. Upwards to God, upwards to a higher morality, upwards to our best self. And this is replaced in the 18th century with churches that look like libraries. They're built horizontally, as libraries are, long shelves of books, and from the outside, no spire to lead your eyes to the eternal. Rather, huge, beautiful windows, clerestory windows, behind which, real windows, not stained glass windows, they're proper windows, behind which rows and rows of books sit. And had you offered this to earlier ages, saying, your church is going to be a reading room, simply a reading room, they would have been horrified. Where is God? They would have said. And indeed the aim is to keep God out and get man into the saddle. That is the project of rationalism, the project of the Enlightenment. Or is it the Enlightenment? Is it the unenlightenment, the disenlightenment, the endarkenment, as mankind turns its back on the mystical and the religious? Of course, it didn't. The Russian Revolution was going to be a completely secular one, but the Russians went on worshipping in their churches. It couldn't be eradicated. And the same is true in the 18th century, cheek by jowl with this progress, the concept of progress, and this rationalism and this scientism and this genuine science. Cheek by jowl, they go on worshipping. God remains, if not at the center, peeping in at the window, at the clerestory window of this strangely horizontal church. He's there, watching, and in many ways, the guilt of denying him comes out in the works of somebody like Newton, who spent so much of his life trying to decipher obscurities in the Bible, rather than work on optics, which was his great fascination, or any of the scientific projects that should have been occupying all his time as a great scientist. So when we look at my syllabus, let's see if I can explain how we are approaching the 18th century. We have to start with Voltaire's great novel Candide, one of the great comic novels of all time, which straddles all time, all cultures, written under some pressure, as some of our other authors were, to conform to a more acceptably religious view of the world. He managed to have a farm on the French border with Switzerland, on the French side, and also a farm on the Swiss side. So when the French police came to ask him about his latest heretical work of rationalism, he could just shove all his papers into his carriage and go quickly across the border into Switzerland, where he was also a citizen. So he was under pressure all his life. Candide is a hilarious manifesto, a hilarious view synoptic view of the world and all the events in it and all the philosophies in it, which endures very successfully. A wonderful musical was made of it not so very long ago. It's still a hilarious book, and he managed to offer an encapsulation of human culture in general in all situations. It's a good place to start because it offers us that watershed sense of the 18th century as a Janus looking both ways, looking back towards the past, looking back towards the Middle Ages, and looking towards the future, looking towards the atom bomb. So, which is science's ultimate baby. So after Candide, we're going to study what's called the long 18th century, often used in academia. The excuse for this is that people would like to teach all kinds of works that actually didn't happen in the 18th century. That's just what we're going to do. At the very, very dawn of the 18th century, in 1700, a great play was written which addressed the matter of how serious men and women can manufacture an enduring relationship. A question that has not yet been answered any better than it is in Congreve's play, The Way of the World. It remains of supreme importance so long as we have Hollywood, so long as we have a culture obsessed with he and she, obsessed with that ending, that happy ending to the two of you. As long as we remain obsessed with that, then The Way of the World will be our most important lesson. I then propose that we do what seems to be now called a deep dive into the darkness of the 18th century. Every century has its darkness, and we have Citoyen Sade, Citizen Sade, born de Sade, gave his name to sadism, famous writer of dirty books, most of which he wrote in prison for writing dirty books, among other crimes. But he became a loyal servant of the revolution and was renamed Citizen Sade, and very nearly got executed a couple of times. It's a hilarious story, and his works are almost unreadably tedious, and so we won't spend much time with them. But they remain a kind of zenith, or if you prefer, a kind of nadir of the obscene imagination, almost mathematical obscenity. And we must see what we think of that and how we trace the pornographic impulse through history. I think an extremely interesting matter, which will not be perfectly defined by de Sade's works, but it's a start. So we will put next to it, next to this French adventure in eroticism, we'll put Lord Rochester's play Sodom, a hilarious work. And we must decide if we think this has something to do with English eroticism as opposed to French. It's a play, used to be impossible to find. It was locked away, literally. It was under lock and key. People were so afraid, even in the 20th century, so afraid of what would happen if people read this play. Oh my God! It's really not a revolutionary thing at all. Now you can find it on the internet. But we have to wonder at the revolutionary potential of pornography, that it terrifies the powers that be, who feel that it's actually going to undermine society and bring about a destruction and revolution. Very interesting, and we should consider that on both sides of the channel. And we will have a look at some Alexander Pope. It's essential that we do, because he is a great poet and a great jewel of the long wig wearing, despite the portrait of him without one, the long wig wearing world. And The Rape of the Lock is a fancy comedy which contains one important passage of sublime darkness, which we will look at, because that is really my mission, is to poke around in the catacombs of the 18th century imagination. And we will also then unearth a modest proposal, the terrifying satire of Swift, who wrote a couple of wonderfully awful and sublime satires, which are a benchmark for anyone attempting satire, as God knows a lot of people will be as they contemplate the Trump presidency in retrospect. Oh my God, what a challenge he's set to writers everywhere. Then I want to look at a great work of literature, Les Liaisons Dangereuses, the dangerous liaisons made into an excellent film, which we'll look at. And we'll read a bit of this very long novel. Maybe I'm going to be asking you to read the whole of the novel. What a terrifying thing for me to do. But it's a great novel. It's an epistolary novel. It's written in letters, which makes it a little more readable in some senses. And then I want to steer us right across the timeline border into the beginning of the 19th century. So this is the long 18th century, which projects itself right all the way, in my case, to 1831. We're going to look at the entire works of a great and important writer, the German writer Georg Büchner. Now, Büchner's entire works consist of one play, one full-length play, one short play. It was written for a competition to which he forgot to submit it, and one unfinished play he died on my birthday, not the actual day on which I was born, but the day of the year, February the 19th. And he died in his early 20s. It's a terrifying loss of one of the great geniuses of history. And very interesting in the sense of the 18th century, looking forwards and back. And in the 18th century, as with Jack the Fatalist, we're going to be unearthing postmodern things. And we will see how the 18th century was deeply prophetic, and more prophetic than actually it could possibly have known. So that will leave us to take a look at Lawrence Sterne, not, I think, at his great work, Tristram Shandy, but perhaps a no less lovable work of his called A Sentimental Journey, which I should like us to take with him, so that his genius will shed its light on us as we proceed, tottering with our candle through the strange jungle of a century. And we'll read something of Diderot's other than Jacques. We'll read a short novel. It's a novella, or it's not really even that. It's just a short piece called Rameau's Nephew, a famous piece of pure contradiction, made of pure contradiction. And through that we can unearth, I hope, unpack my personal belief that contradiction is at the heart of art. There is no art without contradiction. It is the tension between competing opposites that makes a story interesting. Without that, it's boring. So contradiction is our God, as fiction is, certainly. Even if we never acknowledge that God, he is, or she is. So we'll have a look at Rameau's Nephew, the supreme self-contradictory text, and then a little at Jacques the Fatalist, the surrealist text, which hurls us forwards into the 21st century with its sublime challenge to meaning. Meaning, the God of the 18th century. Our syllabus will embody it and embody the challenge to it that was made by the great thinkers and artists of the 18th century. I'm looking forward to it greatly, and I look forward greatly to your discovery of it and your resistance to it and your argument with it and your arguments with me and anything that occurs to stir up our seminar. I look forward to that. And as in my previous email, I look forward to your surviving the terrible crises which, as a nation, we're undergoing. The crisis of health, the crisis of the economy, the crisis of American fascism. These things, if it's only that and not a financial meltdown, we will survive them. I guess we'll survive even a financial meltdown, but pray God that doesn't occur. This has been a great joy to talk to you. I should perhaps have added how long I've been around haunting this university and other universities, and how I've actually spent my life writing novels and plays. But winding up as a full professor, your professor, you are a wonderful student body, the best I've ever taught, much preferable to the Ivy League student bodies that I'm familiar with, and many other distinguished universities where I've taught. This is the best. You are the best. So looking forward to our dialogue. Take care, stay distanced, stay masked, stay warm, stay alive. All the best.